Cool, hell yeah.
What were we talking about?
Last thing I remember was Burt's Bees.
About Burt's Bees and how he got started in his business?
Yeah.
Selling honey out of the back of his old pickup. It was probably a Datsun, down in front of Faye Scott. Now you're going to see Burt around, because he's in Maine in the summertime. And Roxanne Quimby became a partner with him when he had a shop in Guilford. They made and mail ordered tons of Burt Bee products, from lip gloss to the sunburn salve, baby shampoo. Well, she bought him out, but the stipulation was, I don't know, maybe she left 5%. Stipulation was that she always say Burt's Bees.
Yeah.
So she took it to Georgia, and they eventually closed out Guilford, and she did her business in Georgia. I don't know if they had more bees in Georgia or what it was, but she just sold out the company a few years ago for like $9 million. And she kept, I think, 20% or 10% of the company rights. She's no longer CEO, but she kept certain rights when they made the deal. And it still is Burt's Bees. It still sells as Burt's Bees. Because, I'm telling you, he was a rich man. He never had to sell honey. But that was his dream, and that's what he did. So that's why I tell you to hang on to your dream. Mike Salvey, when he started out mowing lawns, did you know that he had an old gold-painted pickup truck with 2 push mowers, 18-inch blades? Did you know that? Mike had that for...
I remember the gold truck, but...
Yeah, they lived on Derigo Drive for a while, and they lived out to Eddington on the corner of Route 9 and 46.
Yeah, the house still sits there.
Yeah, and they had the 3 little kids. He had that old gold pickup. Well, Mike, at the last of it, when he got cancer and after his nephew became part of the business, Mike had a fleet of red trucks, said Family Landscaping. On his big truck, big trailer that carried all the 48-inch lawnmowers, it said Family Tree Landscaping. From an old gold pickup, and he was 38 or 39 years old at the time. Before that, I don't know what he did for work, because Jess met him. He lived in Orrington. She started going with him. He lived with like 3 or 4 other guys in a house they shared in Orrington. It goes back to, I have a dream. And it's real important that you have a dream. Some people may never reach it, but some do. And Burt, I always think of, because I did mending for him. He came to the house often. He gave Leah a ride somewhere one night. She said she'd ride on the back of the truck. She didn't trust him. He was quite the ladies' man, or thought he was. One night he met me at the dance. I went with Harry to the dance over to Melanie Lane. And Burt showed up and wanted to dance, so I danced with him. And he wasn't a comfortable person to dance with. It was like, Well, now, Leah saw him in Guilford, or your mother. I think Leah saw him in Guilford one day. She was up that way. And she said to Burt, she said, "Do you remember me?" He said no, but, you know, he's quite attracted to her. And she said, she went over and she asked him for a hug, and he said, yeah. She said, "Can I take your picture?" And he said, well, he usually didn't give interviews and didn't have pictures. And I'm pretty sure it's Leah that took a picture of him that day. And she said, he's still the same. That old slouch hat, his hair's just the same, gray and curly. And he still admits it, yes, he's still part of Burt's Bees. It sells at in Freeport at LL Bean. It sells on mail order. You can look it up on the computer and buy whatever you want. Roxanne Quimby is usually in Maine quite a bit now because she's bought up most of the land.
Wildlife
She
management
pays the
land.
Indians what they want. If they want $3 million for 1,000 acres of land, she'll pay it. Right, they'll have her lawyers draw right up the paperwork and pay them for it. So when you look at a map at what Roxanne Quimby owes in Maine,
A lot of land.
she was a woman with an education. She knew what she wanted. She had a dream, and she fulfilled it. I don't know if she knew Bert before she came to Maine. And because her 7-year-old twins was quite a pain to him. He never wanted a wife, and he never wanted to be tied down with a bunch of kids, I'm sure. His parents lived way off somewhere. He told me once, he said, my parents are going to come and stay at the motor lodge, so I have to get a new pair of jeans and a new shirt and a new pair of boots, because I'm going to go eat with them. I'm sure they were big money people. The people that I've known, you know, it's, I can see Bert now coming in up to Harry's once. We just sat down to eat, and we lived in that apartment on Spring Street, and Harry and Bert came in and sat down. I introduced him to Harry, and he ate with us. But the time that Bert came to the house and wanted to know if he could take a shower, your father drew the line, your grandfather, Bumper, said, no, Bert can't take a shower here. He said, you can sew for him, you can cut his hair, shave his beard, do whatever it is he wants you to do, but no, he can't use our shower. Because of the way he looked.
This one's sugar, right?
Yeah. Is that the one that has the baggie in it?
It has a baggie of coffee and a baggie of... Looks like sugar.
Yes, I think that is sugar. But, always a gentleman. He never gave me a hard time at all when he came to for sewing or whatever, and I had quite a business. I had 15 girls that sewed for me, and so I'd tell him, Bert, you can drop it off and I'll mend it and you can check back, but I can't tell you that I'll have it ready by any deadline because I have all this other work I have to do. But so many things, you know, when they say that you may be entertaining the Lord without even knowing it. My mom and dad here, I wished I could remember these people's names. It was 2 old men and 1 old woman would come by all the time in a car and stop by the road and ask Mom for cups of coffee. So Mom would make a big pot of coffee and take it out to them. All these cups out there. Old Mrs. Medore and these 2 old men. And they came here all the time. They probably lived off in Social Security checks or something. Maybe one of them got Social Security checks and the rest of them just lived together and traveled together.
Yeah.
But they never worried about washing on Monday, ironing on Tuesday, going to the grocery store and getting 4 or 5 bags of groceries at a time. Are you kidding? They'd stop by a store and get a couple sandwiches and a couple cupcakes, and you didn't buy coffee at the store back then, and you didn't buy ready-made sandwiches probably back then. You'd probably buy a loaf of bread and a pound of pressed meat and a pound of cheese, make your own sandwiches. We always did. I don't remember of ever buying ready-made sandwiches when the kids were growing up. We'd buy a loaf of bread and cheese and meat, buy packages of donuts or something to share with them all. But Mary Medore, and then where we lived in Dexter was the perfect place to live. This side doesn't have arts. They don't have culture. They have the University of Maine. You'd think it would be more culture over here than there is in Dexter, right? With me living in Dexter, I met much more educated people than here. We had kids in here, went to college. Wynn's mom and dad, they went to college. She now has the property in on Spring Bridge Road. But not the culture that I met over there, like with Burke's Bees. I mean, a lot of famous people came through Dexter, went to Guilford, up to Greenville. to their homes. They may have summer homes up there. Or on a Wall Lake. That's where my grandmother, you know, worked and lived for a good part of her life, my father's mother. But I'd like to know where Bert spends winters, you know, if he, I'm sure he doesn't do bees anymore. That's probably part of the thing when he gave up and sold out to Roxanne, that he wouldn't raise bees anymore. That wouldn't be his, I don't know, apothecary or whatever they call it. There's a word for
apothecary, I think.
There's a word for a beekeeper. But every once in a while something will come out in the paper about Roxanne and her tie to Bert's bees and how it started. And I can vouch for that. Leah, the day she met him in Guilford, she said to Bert, she said, "You remember me?" And he said, "Well, not really." She said, "My mother, Gloria Mann, used to do sewing for you." He goes, "Yeah, I remember Gloria Mann, lived in Dexter." But Leah was a teenager then. She wasn't, you know, and this was only a couple of years ago that she saw him in Guilford. I said, well, maybe he lives in Parkman, down on 150. Well, Roxanne didn't live on 150, but she lived in Parkman, right by the Grange Hall. There's a road that goes around and comes out on the North Dexter Road, and that's where she lived.
Roxanne?
Yeah, Roxanne. Knowing how the roads connect over there, and the different people and places that I knew over there, that is real important. The same as here. I know all the roads and everything that connect here, but over here, because I grew up here, I didn't grow up over there as a teenager, I know all about the incest in families over here, and the lack of culture, the lack of art, literary. There's no book club here. There used to be a Christmas club thing in town. Women get together and sew and knit and do things. I don't know if my mom was ever invited to that. My mom did embroidery, but probably was never invited to those women's things. In Dexter, she would have been invited. I mean, I went there and mixed with all of them. Met Nancy Peachy. She could do handicraft stuff really, really well, and her aunts were very talented. We met Cora Cogan. She was 90 years old, and she taught us both how to make yo-yo quilts. She taught us how to do different stitches for crochet and knitting, and she taught us how to copy different stitches and like put flowers on an afghan after you get the afghan made. Cora Cogan was a very talented lady. She'd worked in the woolen mill when she was 16, right beside her father. I can't remember. She said weave room, a stitching room. She worked right beside her father, $16 a week. But as an old lady, she was a grandmother to the principal at the school. Charlie Batchelor was her grandson. Very, very educated, very smart, very clean living people. But they recycled stuff. She would take bread wrappers, strip them out, crochet them into tote bags. She would take the panels off the side of a milk jug, cut them a certain thing, use a paper punch so many holes around each side, crochet them together and make tote bags and hats with them, things she could sell at craft fairs. She would take corn cobs and boil them down in a kettle and use the juice to make a jelly and put it in little jars and label it.
Like corn jelly?
Yeah, corn cob jelly. She was a very, very talented lady, and not just corn cob jelly. She might make beet relish, she might make beet jelly that was delicious. You'd think, like old corn cobs, we threw ours out to the pig. We'd put them in a pail, take them down to Dwayne's and feed them to his pigs. But not Cora. No. Can't remember what her daughter's name was. I think it was Elizabeth was her daughter, married to a bachelor right there in Dexter. And I'm sure Bert knew that I was in Greenbush and this was the property where I stayed, building a house on it. I'm sure that he'll drop by at one of these days. In fact, I might go on the computer when I go home and see if I can find him. Because I'm sure somebody will see me on Facebook looking for me and give me the information, looking for him. But next Friday, not this Friday, I hope Audrey don't get it mixed up. The Friday after Labor Day, I told her, I would meet with her and Kenny. Kenny has Alzheimer's. Audrey has to go for dialysis 3 times a week down in Bangor. And I told her I'd go see her. And guess what? Donna and Tim moved. You know their thing of moving every 3 months.
Yeah.
They moved into the house in Exeter. They were fixing it up. They put up a beautiful clothesline with cedar posts. Mows the lawn. Yeah, they're going to insulate. They're going to stay there the winter. And I said, no, you're not, Donna. Oh, yeah. She called me the other day. She said...
They moved back to the Corinth?
No, they moved to Dexter. Right in the same building as the laundromat and car wash on Main Street.
My God.
I said, Tim can't handle that.
No.
Oh, yeah. I said, Donna, he couldn't handle living in the apartment because
Yeah,
somebody
up on the
walked
hill.
around at night. So when I go to... I'm not telling her I'm going to be in Dexter next Friday. I'm going to surprise her. Because she's probably told everybody by now that, you know, she's my sister. She's told everybody that she's David's twin. I'm sure that pleases David to no end.
Oh,
He doesn't want to be related to the Berries at all. Now he's a twin to Donna. Oh, God. But, yeah, that's my take on that. So if you want to put human manure and dry it and burn it and see what happens, it'll probably smell like shit.
Oh, I imagine.
I mean, that's what
I'd
it
rather smell
is.
shit than whatever else is out here, a skunk or...
Well, in other countries where, I don't know, it's camels and llamas and sheep,
Oh, they take everything.
you know, they were
Use it.
showing them picking it up by families. Families that have these animals, of course, are better off than people that just try to go find the stuff to sell it. They already have theirs, and it shows how it's dry, and they stack it like pancakes, and they sell them. It's like sterno.
Canned heat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, to us. No, they take from the land. I mean, what can you find out here that we could use to make compost? My pea vines. I just pulled the pea vines
Grass,
tonight.
dead leaves. I mean, you could chip limbs that have fallen down in the road.
Well, after you mow the lawn, rake it and put it in the barrel because you're going to use it for compost.
Yeah. If you got worms in there, they'll eat that right up.
This land never had worms in the ground. You could dig and dig. And I always said that if you can dig in soil and find worms, that's good soil. And if there's frogs running around your property, then you know that you're okay. This land used to be covered with slugs everywhere. Slugs. You know why? Of people just peeing and coughing and spitting everywhere. Slugs are like snails.
Nature's filter.
They're like snails. I mean, you can pour salt on them and it melts them. But all they do is go around and suck up all that nasty stuff. Well, now there's worms in this dirt. When I dig to plant, there's worms in this dirt. And if you set a bucket of manure out here and keep filling it with water to use for your plants like I did last summer,
The frogs.
the bucket was full of frogs. They must evolve from the poop.
I don't know.
I can believe in evolution if that's true. Where do all these things come from? God create them?
Yep.
He must. He created everything. In the beginning was God. Yeah, it's just an awesome world, and when you get to be my age, you're going to have stories to tell, not just about family and friends and schoolmates, but really famous people that you've met along the way. Your mother used to go to meetings, I won't say which ones, but she used to go to meetings and she used to trade gum for cigarettes with Stephen King. And I never knew it because of sentimentals. I never knew it until he made the movie in Dexter, Elm Street.
Yeah.
When he made the movie, in part of the movie in Dexter, he was downtown with a ski hat on and old work clothes, looking like the other people that were down there at night. And your mother said, "That's Stephen King." And I said, "It is?" And she said, "Yeah." So she said, "You wait here." And she went over and wanted to know if she could trade a stick of gum for a cigarette. And yeah, he'd do that. They stood there chatting for a while before she come back. Yeah. And you'll have those same kind of things to tell. It's like your mother right now, you know, is reviewing books for a writer, and she's going to have her name in the front of these books, like people...
the thanks to...
Yeah, thanks to so-and-so, or this is an awesome writing, I am so glad you took the time to write. Her name is going to be on the review. She's still... I mean, there are so many. I considered it important at the time, and I still say it's important that I did mending for Burt's Bees. And a lot of other people in town that I go into town and people will say, "Oh, hi, I'm Mrs. Mann." So if you have a dream of doing something with your poop, I mean, other than playing in it and rubbing it on the wall somewhere, put it in a bucket.
Yeah, I think my mother would be more approving of posting this video than the other one.
In fact, I'll tell you, in this town, across town, was Malcolm and Nellie McPhee. Their son Pudge lived with them because he was a little off kilter. And her mother, Mrs. Ruggs, lived with them. Riggs of Ruggs, Mrs. Ruggs, I think her name was, lived with them. Pudgy would drink. They all drank. And she read a lot of paperbacks. He didn't do much. He couldn't read or write. But he'd take every paperback and circle the word "thee" on every page to every paperback. Pudgy McPhee. And when he got up with a hangover and he wasn't supposed to wake anybody up, like come downstairs and go through the house, he would take a piece of tarred paper and shit on it out front of the porch. And Amy and Grampy White, because lived next door at the time, and they would see what he was doing down there. Pudgy did a lot of things. He didn't bother people. He'd get drunk and go singing by the seesaw. Little old Susie sitting by the seesaw, shifting, sifting sand, kind of stuff. And the last of it, Johnny Hilton could tell you if you went in and talked with Johnny Hilton. The last of Pudgy living, because Malcolm and Nellie died and Grammy Ruggs died. And there was Sandra and Bob was his brother and sister. Seems like there's another girl there. But Pudgy, he must have lived in a home somewhere in New Hampshire, because every summer he'd come up to Johnny Hilton's and stay the summer. Maybe he lived with his brother Bob down in New Hampshire. That's where Bob lived. And Pudgy would come up to Johnny Hilton's, and Johnny could tell you the story of Pudgy. This town was a whole lot different, and one day Tommy and I sat down and wrote all the houses down and who lived in them back in 1954 when I moved here. There was a lot more houses than there is out there right now. And the old people that lived here are all gone, except for Havelock, Madden, the other one, Carroll's. Because the Dunns, the only one is Vita and Martha and Irene, are the only Dunns that are left, I think. There's some McLaughlins that still live here. Pat Sherman came here after the Akersons moved. They were here with a tree farm. Rigby's had left. But did I tell you that Eddie Havelock told me when I went for the fire permit that Leon Haskell and his wife just gave $1 million to cancer care? And they're going to give more. Their son, the only son they had, the only child I think they had, his name was Race. He died of cancer at 4 years old. And in there now, what used to be an all wooded area across from where Leon lives,
Yeah.
there's a house there that the Rigbys lived in when they came here from up to McQuahog. They've cleared it. It was nothing but dirt. Leah and I came down the back road when she was up here with me. All dirt. I said to Eddie, what's going on? He said, they're clearing it. They're going to sell it. They'll have more money to give to cancer care. He said, you know, they're giving people. He said, they just gave $1 million this year to cancer care. And I said, because their son died of, well, yeah, their son died of cancer at 4 years old. Very generous people, and they probably wouldn't want Eddie telling. Most people that give that kind of money, they don't want it. They don't want to be known for that first thing. That can be part of their thing, but not. But in this town now, there's a lot of Carols. There's a few Smarts left. I mean, Jacob lives here. His brother, what's his name? Patrick lives here. Delane lives here full time. Louise was a Smart. She lives here. Cleta and Walter up here from Florida in the summertime. They're not doing very well, and they're very angry that they're not doing very well health-wise. She always wanted me to go to Florida with them winters and be up here in the summer to take care of them. I said, no, I'm done. I came to take care of Mom and Dad, that's it. And I did what I needed to do in the meantime. But I won't take care of them. They said Irene Havelock has dementia really bad. I haven't seen her quite a while. Martha, my third grade teacher, she's in her 90s, lives out here. Her daughter Beth lives across the road in Helen and Carl Dunn's homestead. And Vita and Carol Madden, Vita Dunn and Carol Madden, they live just down the road. They got 2 or 3 kids. But this town has a lot of cancer. And they say it's because of the amount of arsenic in the water. If you have a drilled well or a hand-dug well, they said it tests really high for arsenic in this area. That's what Galen Madden's wife, Janice, told me. She was a Carol. And Norman Millard isn't coming up this year. Norman Harris was adopted into the Harris family. He was a Millard from New Hampshire. And Mary married Todd Harris, had adopted Norman, and then she married Lloyd Harris, his brother. Divorced one and married the other. Abby and Alice's mom lived out here at the corner where the fire station is, in a Todd paper house. It was more open and more free than ours was. Ours wasn't built to entertain us kids. Theirs was a family house, Todd paper. Grammy Harris lived next door, Lloyd's mother, on a sand knoll. She lived in one room. Her bed and everything else was in that room. She used to give the kids 10 cents. Whoever went there and dumped her pot in the morning. They'd take her pail out through a shed, was an outhouse, and dumped the pail out there. This was quite a quaint town at the time. I could draw you a map at some point and show you who lived where and where the buildings were that aren't there now. Where the parsonage is now, there was a man that lived there that kept a pig that run loose in the yard with him. He might be splitting wood, he might be out there getting some food ready to cook or whatever. The pig would be with him. One day he died, and it was, this is what women did back in the day. They went to his house, they bathed him, they put him in clean clothes, and call for the undertaker to come. In olden days, you didn't need, I guess, a death certificate if you just died of old age or whatever, because the women would go and bathe a person and lay him out, they called it. Lay him out, get ready for the undertaker. And that's what they did with that man. But every day when we went to school, like I would stop and look at him, he never talked. Funny. But a lot of men lived in little shacks in town. But Captain McElroy, down by the railroad tracks, had a nice house he lived in. That man, I don't know. They said he was Maud McFeeta's husband. He used to be a captain. Maud McFeeta's had an arm on this side, like this, only this long. Full arm on this side. That was Cleta Ramsey, Cleta Smart, Jacob Smart, Patrick Smart, William Smart. It was their grandmother, Maud McFeeta's. Her son Seth lived with her until she died. Then he lived there alone. Never married, used to ride a bicycle and sell greeting cards and blare door to door in the whole town. And eventually he ended up in assisted living up in Howland at the nursing home. But all in all, I couldn't tell you I ever met anybody around here that was educated, had any culture, weren't interested in painting, writing, anything. And moving to Dexter, they had all of that. A very modern town. You know, their own library, all the churches, all different churches, not just a Baptist church. They had 11 churches when I moved there. And a lot of culture. And the people were willing to share. They treated you like, they didn't say, you know, where'd you come from? No? No, just a nice place to live. And I think most of them had their own dream, what they wanted to be and what they wanted to do. Here there was so little of that. I can tell you that the Carrolls down
Carroll Village,
Buddy Carroll and his wife, down where the road started to collapse.
yeah.
Well, Buddy Carroll, I think that's his name that lives there, Dolly and Buddy Carroll. They had 5 kids. Donald and Janice and Glendon and Ginger and Sally. Donald has always worked for NASA. He's home this summer. Glendon has a trailer beside his parents now. Glendon's wife died, kidney failure, they said. He was my age, graduated with me from grammar school down here. But Norman isn't coming up this summer. He didn't come up for Lee Academy's reunion, class reunion, and he's not coming up in September when we have Old Home Days here. He has a dog. I just told Shirley, she's a mutual friend of both of us, I said, Shirley, he wants to come up and stay with somebody for a week that he's here. But he has that dog, and he treats it like it's his girlfriend. And he makes it a point when he sends me a Christmas card. Here's a picture of Millie and I. Millie's the dog. Okay. I say, here's a picture of me and my cat Molly. But anyway, I said, he just don't have a place to stay. He can't stay with Buddy and Dolly this year because Donald's home. And he don't have anywhere else that he can stay because he isn't willing to get a motel room. He works for GE. He probably gets $80,000, $90,000 a year, plus 8 paid weeks. Said, you know, I told him he can't come to my apartment because, for one thing, there's no visiting guest pets allowed. Molly must went to hide. Close that refrigerator door tighter too. I see it's open. But that's my take on Bert the Bee Man and his dream, Mike Falvey and his dream. So if you have a dream that you can use the methane from your stool or your waste or your manure or your feces, follow your dream. That's all I can tell you. I don't know, has Bert ever researched things on a computer to do what he wanted to do. I think he was educated from college, and he probably spent a lot of time at the library. Computer wasn't a big thing back then. And Mike Salvey, a computer was a newer thing to him. Not in the beginning, he didn't have that, but it's probably what moved his business along. His parents died and they left him plenty of money, and he invested it in the company. You know, he bought a used Harley. He had his signs painted. Jessica created that family tree, and he had that all painted, but his mother died. His father had diabetes, and they took his leg off. His father died. I think his father died first and left him like $80,000 or something. Then his mother died and left him. The 5 kids or 7 kids share the cottage in York Beach, and they have to take care of it and maintain it and all of that. Well, if you was to meet Mike's family, you'd never know that they were all educated with degrees, and he was in the Navy for years. Very talented man. 2 of his sisters are doctors in the Belfast area. And I met his whole family anyway at one point, but I met his 2 sisters when they came to court over, Jessica and Judkins or whatever that guy's name was, trying to take Casey out of school and keep him. And Mike had a state trooper, 2 state troopers that coached Little League with him there for witnesses. I mean, that's the kind of person Mike was. Not when he started, because Mike was an alcoholic. He was a Navy guy. But as I think Vinny was his, what do they call it, sponsor, has really helped him. I mean, they put together not just AA, but their higher power is God. Not, I have a higher power. You know, it's just pencil right now, but I think it's going to be a jackknife in a little while. No, their higher power is God. And, you know, and that's what Lenny says all the time. And he prays with Adam every night, and he reads him a story, and he rocks him. And when he's going to be out for the evening to a meeting, he takes Adam aside, and they have a word of prayer, and he reads him a story, and Lydia takes over from there, makes sure he eats, and then she reads him a story, and she wraps him in his blanket and rocks him and sings to him before she puts him to bed, because Lenny always wants him to go to bed peacefully. And he does. And when you talk with Adam, he very well understands what you're saying, because I'd say his mom is continuing to be a good mother. She was an awesome mother for 10 months. Even though she was using, and that caused so much trouble. But she was a good mom, and I'd say she's still a good mom to Adam and to James. Adam was just up there for a week.